The morning mist clung to the waters of the Philippine Sea like a shroud of destiny on October 20th, 1944. Admiral William Frederick Halsey, Jr. stood on the bridge of the USS New Jersey, his weathered hands gripping the rail as he surveyed the vast expanse of steel and humanity spread before him. Never in the history of naval warfare had such a colossal force assembled. Over 800 vessels carrying the hopes and fears of two mighty empires locked in mortal combat. The decision to invade Leyte had been months in the making. General Douglas MacArthur, true to his promise, was returning to the Philippines with overwhelming force. But the Japanese Empire, bleeding from 1,000 wounds yet still defiant, had prepared their own surprise. Operation Shogo, a desperate gambit to crush the American invasion fleet that was already in motion. Captain Ernest Edwin Evans of the USS Johnston felt the familiar weight of command as he watched his destroyer's crew prepare for what they all sensed would be a battle unlike any other. The young Filipino-American officer had risen through the ranks with distinction, earning respect for his tactical brilliance and unwavering courage under fire. His ship, though small compared to the mighty battleships and carriers surrounding them, carried the same lethal determination that had driven American forces across the Pacific. Intelligence reports streamed in all morning. Japanese Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, including the massive battleships Yamato and Musashi, was steaming toward Leyte Gulf through the San Bernardino Strait. Meanwhile, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's northern force, built around carriers with precious few aircraft, approached from the north as a decoy. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Draw away the American fast carriers, then crush the vulnerable invasion fleet with the world's most powerful surface ships. Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid, commanding the 7th Fleet supporting the landings, studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His force was formidable for supporting amphibious operations, but lacked the speed and firepower to engage Kurita's battle line. Everything depended on coordination with Halsey's 3rd Fleet and assumptions about Japanese intentions that were about to be tested in blood and steel. According to naval historian Samuel Eliot Morrison's comprehensive account in The Two-Ocean War, the stage was set for what would become the largest naval engagement in history, involving nearly 300 ships and hundreds of thousands of sailors, soldiers, and airmen from both sides. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning haze, the full magnitude of the American Armada came into view. Transport ships disgorged endless streams of men and equipment onto Leyte's beaches, while destroyers and cruisers provided covering fire. Above them, carrier aircraft maintained constant patrols, scanning the horizon for signs of the approaching storm. In his cabin aboard the Yamato, Admiral Kurita reviewed his orders one final time. The mission was clear: break through whatever forces opposed him and destroy the American invasion fleet at all costs. The fate of the Philippines, perhaps the entire war, hung in the balance. His ships carried the cream of the Imperial Navy's remaining strength, and failure would mean Japan's certain defeat. As afternoon shadows lengthened, radar operators on both sides began detecting the first contacts. The greatest naval battle in history was about to begin, and courage would prove as important as firepower in determining the outcome. Admiral Ozawa stood silently on the bridge of his flagship Zuikaku, watching his meager air groups launch what he knew would be their final missions. The irony was not lost on him. He commanded what appeared to be a mighty carrier force, yet his flight decks could barely muster 100 operational aircraft. His role in Operation Shogo was perhaps the most difficult of all. Sacrifice his ships to ensure Kurita's success. The morning of October 24th brought the first serious clashes. American search planes located Kurita's center force, threading through the dangerous waters near Palawan. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, leading a fighter sweep from the USS Essex, couldn't believe the targets spread before him. The Japanese had committed their remaining heavy units, including the legendary super battleships that had haunted American nightmares since Pearl Harbor. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commanding Task Force 38 from the USS Lexington, immediately began coordinating massive airstrikes against Kurita's force. Wave after wave of Hellcats, Helldivers, and Avengers roared off American flight decks, their engines creating a symphony of destruction that echoed across the Philippine Sea. The aviators faced the strongest surface force Japan had assembled in months. The attacks proved devastating beyond expectations. The mighty Musashi, sister ship to the Yamato, absorbed hit after hit from bombs and torpedoes. Her massive armor, designed to withstand the heaviest naval gunfire, proved inadequate against the coordinated fury of American naval aviation. By afternoon, the great ship was listing heavily, her speed reduced to a crawl, as damage control parties fought desperately to keep her afloat. Kurita's other ships suffered as well. The heavy cruiser Mayoko took torpedo damage that forced her retirement, while several destroyers sustained varying degrees of damage. Yet, despite the punishment, the center force pressed onward toward San Bernardino Strait, driven by duty and the knowledge that failure meant Japan's doom. Meanwhile, Ozawa's northern force had been detected by American reconnaissance aircraft, exactly as planned. The veteran admiral watched grimly as Halsey's powerful Third Fleet began turning north, taking the bait that would leave San Bernardino Strait unguarded. Everything now depended on Kurita's ability to push through and reach the vulnerable transports in Leyte Gulf. That afternoon brought tragedy and triumph in equal measure. Musashi finally succumbed to her wounds and slipped beneath the Philippine waters, taking hundreds of her crew with her. Kurita made a momentous decision. Bloodied but not broken, he reversed course briefly, leading American commanders to believe he was retreating. In reality, he was simply reorganizing his battered forces for the final push through San Bernardino Strait. Aboard the New Jersey, Admiral Halsey faced one of the war's most critical decisions. Intelligence indicated that Ozawa's carriers posed a significant threat, and the opportunity to destroy Japan's remaining flat tops seemed too valuable to ignore. Against the protest of some subordinates who urged caution, he committed his entire fast carrier force to pursuing the northern force, leaving only a few destroyers and escort carriers to guard the strait. Captain Evans, still patrolling with his destroyer squadron, felt the growing tension as night approached. Something massive was building in the darkness beyond the Philippine Islands, and every sailor in the fleet could sense it. Younger crew members joked nervously about the coming action, while veterans quietly checked their equipment and wrote letters they hoped would never need to be sent. As darkness fell on October 24th, 3 separate naval forces converged on the waters around Leyte Gulf. Kurita's center force, reduced but still formidable, was approaching San Bernardino Strait from the west. In the south, Admiral Shoji Nishimura's southern force was preparing to force Surigao Strait in a coordinated pincer movement. Far to the north, Ozawa waited with his depleted carriers, knowing his sacrifice would either enable Japan's greatest naval victory or mark the final chapter in the Imperial Navy's history. The stage was set for October 25th, a day that would live forever in naval history. The darkness of October 24th gave way to the pre-dawn hours of October 25th, and with it came the thunder of naval gunfire. Admiral Jesse Oldendorf had positioned his battle line across the mouth of Surigao Strait with the precision of a master tactician. It would be recognized as the last great battleship engagement in naval warfare. Nishimura's southern force approached through the narrow waters with desperate determination. His flagship Yamashiro, accompanied by the battleship Fuso and supporting cruisers and destroyers, represented Japan's final attempt to coordinate a multi-pronged assault on the American invasion fleet. The veteran admiral knew the odds were against him, but duty demanded he press forward into what appeared increasingly like a carefully prepared trap. Commander Robert Copeland, aboard the destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts, watched the radar screens with growing amazement as the massive signatures of American battleships took their positions. Ships that had once been raised from the mud of Pearl Harbor, the Pennsylvania, Tennessee, California, Maryland, and West Virginia, now formed an impenetrable line of steel and vengeance across Nishimura's path. The first shots came from American destroyers executing perfectly coordinated torpedo attacks against the advancing Japanese column. Lieutenant Commander Robert Leon led his squadron in a textbook approach, launching their deadly fish into the darkness before retiring at high speed. The explosions that followed illuminated the night sky, revealing the devastating effectiveness of American tactical coordination. Fuso took multiple torpedo hits that broke her back, splitting the battleship into two burning sections that continued fighting independently until they finally slipped beneath the sea. Battleships were supposed to be unsinkable fortresses, yet here was proof that even the mightiest warships could be destroyed by coordinated attacks from smaller vessels. As Nishimura's reduced force pressed onward, they encountered the full fury of Oldendorf's battle line. The American admiral had achieved every naval tactician's dream, crossing the T, positioning his ships so their full broadsides could engage the enemy's lead vessels, while the Japanese could only return fire with their forward guns. The mathematics of destruction heavily favored the Americans. Yamashiro fought with desperate courage, her main batteries engaging multiple American battleships as her crew struggled to maintain course through the devastating crossfire. Admiral Nishimura, realizing his mission had become impossible, nevertheless continued the attack with fatalistic resolve. His ship absorbed hit after hit from 14-inch and 16-inch shells, which tore through her armor and started massive fires throughout her superstructure. According to military historian William T. Blood's analysis in Red Sun Setting, The Battle of the Philippine Sea, the engagement in Surigao Strait demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of American naval gunnery and tactical coordination developed through years of Pacific combat experience. Behind Nishimura, Admiral Kayohide Shima's second striking force approached the strait, unaware of the destruction ahead. The Japanese coordination that had seemed so promising on paper was breaking down in the chaos of night combat. Communication failures prevented effective mutual support between the converging forces. Captain Roland Smoot, commanding the cruiser USS Denver, directed his ship's fire with deadly precision as the Japanese formation disintegrated. American radar-directed gunnery, perfected through months of night battles in the Solomon Islands, proved devastatingly superior to Japanese optical range-finding in the darkness of Surigao Strait. The heavy cruiser Mogami, attempting to support the Yamashiro, found herself overwhelmed by concentrated fire from multiple American cruisers. Her bridge crew fought valiantly to maintain the ship's combat effectiveness, even as shells systematically destroyed her weapons and fire control systems. The Japanese fighting spirit remained unbroken, but courage alone could not overcome the stark reality of American material superiority. As dawn approached, the waters of Surigao Strait were littered with burning Japanese ships and the wreckage of Nishimura's once proud force. The southern force had been effectively annihilated, with only a handful of destroyers managing to escape the devastating trap. The first phase of Operation Shogo had failed completely, but the greatest test still lay ahead in the waters off Samar Island. where Kurita's center force was about to encounter the most unlikely heroes in naval history. The morning sun of October 25th revealed a scene that would have been impossible to imagine just hours earlier. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers, emerged from San Bernardino Strait to find themselves bearing down on what appeared to be a handful of American escort carriers and destroyers. After the previous day's losses, Kurita believed he had finally found Halsey's main fleet. Rear Admiral Clifton, A.F. Sprague, commanding escort carrier Task Unit 77.4.3, known by the call sign Taffy 3, could hardly believe the reports flooding his bridge. Through the morning haze, the distinctive pagoda masts of Japanese battleships were clearly visible, growing larger by the minute as they approached at flank speed. His 6 escort carriers, designed primarily for anti-submarine warfare and close air support, were now facing the most powerful surface force in the Pacific. Captain Ernest Evans needed no orders to understand what was required. The USS Johnston, along with her sister destroyers, represented the only barrier between Kurita's guns and the vulnerable carriers. Without hesitation, he ordered his ship to attack speed and began the most audacious destroyer charge in naval history. His crew, many barely out of their teens, responded with the precision and courage that had carried American forces across thousands of miles of hostile ocean. The carrier USS Gambier Bay, commanded by Captain Walter V. R. Vuegg, launched every available aircraft while simultaneously preparing for what seemed like inevitable destruction. Her crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that every plane that reached the air might be the difference between survival and annihilation for the entire task unit. Lieutenant Commander Robert W. Copeland, aboard the destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts, watched in amazement as his small ship joined the charge against the Japanese battle line.